Do you really believe the American dream is dead, or is it just hiding in the zip codes nobody talks out? Everyone screams about $500,000 starter homes and bidding wars where you basically need to sell a kidney to get a one-car garage. But what if I told you there are towns in this country where the price tag on a house looks like a typo? Like something you'd expect on a Craigslist scam ad. I'm talking about real places on maps with schools, cops, potholes, churches and ghosts, where you can buy property for less than the cost of a used Kia. And no, this isn't. It's happening right now in the forgotten corners of America where Wall Street doesn't invest and Zillow doesn't brag. But here's the catch. These homes aren't just cheap because nobody found them yet. They're cheap because something happened. Industry collapsed, rivers flooded, steel plants rusted, or people flat out fled like they were escaping a horror movie. You're not just buying square footage, you're buying into a story sometimes gritty, sometimes tragic, sometimes haunted. One town literally gives away land for free if you've got the guts to build on cursed soil. Another, you can snag a house for under 10 grand, but good luck explaining to your insurance company why your neighbor is technically a raccoon. This isn't HGTV, this is the dark underbelly of U.S. real estate where home prices are so low you'll think it's a scam. Buckle up because what you're about to see isn't for the faint of heart. Number 10. Toledo, Ohio. Toledo is the kind of place where you can buy a house for the price of a vacation in Disney World and still have money left over for churros. We're talking about the Glass City, once a booming industrial hub where Jeep rolled off assembly lines and glass factories paid solid middle-class wages. Today, the jobs are fewer, the wages lower, but the real estate deals look like they were pulled from a Monopoly game. Median home prices hover around $100,000 and $100,000, but here's the kicker. Certain neighborhoods have fixer-uppers listed for under $2. Yes, a real four-wall house with plumbing, not a shed. The cost of living, 24% below the national average, and the average rent is only about $7. But before you grab your checkbook, let's talk reality. Toledo's poverty rate sits at a bruising 26%, well above the U.S. average, and violent crime rates are around 1,060 per 100. The University of Toledo injects a college town vibe. The Mud Hens baseball games are a local obsession, and the art museum is bizarrely world-class for a city this size. Locals even joke, Toledo is the cheapest town with the best zoo you'll ever see. On Reddit, someone wrote, "Buying a home in Toledo is like rolling dice. You either end up with a quiet street of retirees, or a neighbor who collects shopping carts. Would you risk the gamble if the entry price was less than a year's insurance premium in California?" Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Johnstown is proof that history repeats itself, sometimes in floods. This small city has been washed out not once, not twice, but 3 major times in its history, the most infamous being the Great Flood of 1889, that killed over The trauma still lingers, but so does the real estate market, at laughably low prices. Median home value, around 5. Average rent, a jaw-dropping $650 a month. That's less than what some people spend on their phone bill and Netflix combined. On paper, Johnstown looks like a dream for bargain hunters, but you need to factor in the baggage. The poverty rate, 34%. Unemployment, historically rough, hovering around 7%, surprisingly lower than cities like Detroit, but the blight, vacant properties, collapsing roofs, boarded-up storefronts tells a harder truth, and yet for those who stick it out, Johnstown has character. Nestled in the Allegheny Mountains, the scenery is jaw-dropping. The inclined plane, a massive hillside funicular, still creaks its way up and down, a relic of when industry here roared. A local joked online, "Living in Johnstown is like owning a house in the middle of an apocalypse movie set, but with better mountain views." One real estate agent even advertised a 2-story brick house for $18,000, less than the price of a used Toyota Corolla. So yes, you could pay cash for a home here and be mortgage-free by Tuesday. The real question, can you handle the occasional flash flood warning and the feeling that time froze in night? Number 8. Cairo, Illinois. Now we're talking about a town that feels less like a bargain and more like a dare. Cairo, Illinois sits at the southern tip of the state where the Mississippi and Ohio rivers meet. Once a bustling riverboat city, Cairo boomed during the Civil War and Reconstruction era, but then came the economic collapse, racial tensions, riots, and decades of government neglect. Today, Cairo looks like a postcard from urban decay, except the houses are practically free. Median home value, Yes, 30,000. That's less than some people's credit card debt. And here's where it gets wild. There are documented sales of livable houses for under the cost of living, 36% lower than the national average. Rent averages 550 fighters per month. Sounds perfect, right? Wrong. Cairo's population has shriveled from 15,000 in the 1920s to under 1,700 today. Entire neighborhoods are gone, swallowed by weeds, schools closed, businesses boarded up. One Reddit user said, "Cairo isn't a ghost town, it's a ghost with a zip code." The upside, absolute silence, open land and houses cheap enough to buy with a weekend's DoorDash hustle. The downside, poverty, high crime relative to the tiny population, and a sense of eerie abandonment. Walking through downtown feels like stepping onto the set of a dystopian film. Empty streets, fading signs, and the occasional church bell echoing through nothing. So yes, you can buy a house here for the price of a gaming PC, but can you live with the quiet, the decay, and the feeling the town itself gave up decades ago? Number 7. Pine Bluff, Arkansas. Welcome to Pine Bluff, Arkansas, where real estate prices are so low it feels like you're hacking the housing market. Median home value, 7. But don't let that fool you. Scour the listings, and you'll find foreclosed homes going for under $15,000. Rent, around $720 per month. That's so cheap you could rent 2 houses here for the cost of a studio in Austin, Texas. But Pine Bluff isn't just cheap, it's complicated. Once a thriving hub for paper mills and farming, the town now struggles with one of the highest crime rates in the entire U.S. Violent crime, around 1,250 per 100,000, roughly 3 times the national average. Poverty rate, 32. Rough, unless you're in agriculture, healthcare, or corrections. But here's the twist. Pine Bluff is also oddly beautiful. It sits on the Arkansas River, with scenic wetlands, bird-watching spots, and outdoor festivals that refuse to quit. Locals describe it as a city in decline, but not dead yet. In fact, developers are whispering about turning it into a hub for renewable energy and river commerce. One Redditor put it bluntly, "In Pine Bluff, you can either live like a king on a tiny salary or get caught up in crime statistics. That duality defines it. Imagine paying less than $400 a month on a mortgage for a 3-bedroom house, while your cousin in New York pays the same for a parking space. Would you take the gamble, or is Pine Bluff a bargain wrapped in barbed wire?" Gary, Indiana. Gary, Indiana, forever linked with steel mills, Michael Jackson's childhood home, and some of the cheapest housing in America. Median home price, $500. But here's where things get shocking. In some neighborhoods, homes sell for under. Yes, a 5-figure sum buys you a house with walls, a roof, and maybe even appliances if you're lucky. Rent averages around $800 per month, which is less than half of Chicago's convenient, since Gary sits just 30 miles from the Windy City. But there's a catch, and it's not small. Gary's population has collapsed from 17,800 in 1960 to just 68,000 today. Entire blocks are abandoned, steel jobs dried up, and crime rates remain stubbornly high. Violent crime, 1,400 per 100,000. Poverty, 33%. And the schools, let's just say they've seen better days. But hold on, Gary isn't just a ruin, it's also weirdly resilient. Chicago commuters are starting to buy up property here, hoping for spillover growth. The beaches along Lake Michigan are shockingly pretty, with sand dunes and views that rival spots in Michigan. A Redditor once wrote, "Gary is like the housing lottery. You either get a historic brick beauty for $15,000, or a house raccoons claim squatter rights on, and that's the truth. You can buy cheap here, but the gamble is whether your neighborhood comes back or vanishes." Imagine paying less than your yearly Starbucks bill for a home near a lake. Would you roll the dice on Gary, Indiana, or would you drive past with the doors locked? Number 5. Danville, Illinois. Danville is the kind of place where you can buy a whole house for what people in LA spend on parking and protein powder, and yes, the math is real enough to make your mortgage broker cry. Listen, if you want cheap, Danville doesn't flirt with it, it marries it. Typical home values hover in the low $70 Ks, with recent medians swinging under $80 K depending on the month. Translation, you could pay cash and still have room in the budget for a new roof and a backup sump pump. Rent, think $800 on average, with the federal fair market benchmark putting a two-bed around 950, meaning you can actually breathe between paychecks instead of negotiating with your landlord like it's a hostage situation. But I'm not selling you a fairy tale. Danville's cost of living is roughly 18% cheaper than the US average for day-to-day life, yet the city also wears a hard truth, a very high violent crime rate that demands common-sense street smarts and neighbors who look out for each other, and population. It's been slipping for decades, which is why the deals look unreal: fewer bidders, more boarded windows, more leverage for you if you've got grit, capital and a tolerance for elbow grease renovation. Here's the upside: nobody tells you houses sit longer, think months not days, so you can actually inspect, negotiate, and structure rehab like a pro instead of speed running an offer at midnight. River trails, old brick blocks and industrial bones are there for the taking if you can handle the trade-offs that come with a bargain this loud. Louis is the kind of place where you can buy a house for less than a wedding dress, and depending on your neighborhood, one might actually last longer than the other. Once a booming industrial hub just across the river from St. Louis, Missouri, this city has been ground zero for economic decline since the factories left. Median home value, $510,000. But that's just the median. Scroll deep enough on Zillow and you'll see houses listed for $8,000, sometimes even less. Rent, a shocking $650 per month, one of the lowest in the Midwest. But let's not sugarcoat this. East St. Louis has one of the highest crime rates in the United States, with violent crime pushing past 2,200 per 100,000 people. Poverty rate, 35%. Infrastructure, let's just say there are potholes big enough to trap small dogs. And yet there's something magnetic about this city. The jazz and blues history is legendary, the barbecue scene still rages, and the Mississippi River views are priceless if you can see past the boarded-up store. A Redditor once joked, "Buy a house in East St. Louis and congratulations, you're also buying a free guard dog, whether you wanted one or not." But here's the real twist. Urban developers and small investors are circling like vultures, betting that cheap land plus proximity to St. Louis equals future gold. Would you gamble on a $12,000 house that might someday sit in a revitalized district, or will it forever be a cautionary tale in urban planning gone wrong? Camden, New Jersey. Camden is the ultimate paradox: dirt cheap real estate, sitting right across the river from Philadelphia, one of the hottest housing markets in the Northeast. Median home price, $84,000. But here's the kicker: you can find row houses selling for $25,000. That's less than what Philadelphians are paying in property taxes alone. Rent, around $950 per month, making it one of the cheapest metro-adjacent markets on the East Coast. So why isn't everyone rushing in? Camden has been infamous for decades, once ranked the most dangerous city in America, with violent crime rates soaring past 2,400 per one. From poverty rate, nearly 37%. Schools, struggling. Jobs, scarce. But here's the surprise: Camden is starting to change. Massive waterfront investments, a new aquarium district, and big companies like Subaru and Campbell's Soup planting headquarters there are slowly shifting the landscape. A Redditor described Camden as buying a stock everyone else abandoned, hoping someday it pays off. The truth is, Camden sits in a sweet spot: cheap houses with direct access to Philadelphia, a city where the median home price is over that's a $200K difference, separated by just a brick. Imagine snagging a row house for $20, commuting across the river in 10 minutes, and saving six figures compared to Philly. Tempting, right? But then comes the question: can you handle the crime, the blight and the reputation? Camden is cheap, yes, but it's not just a home, it's a challenge. Would you take it? 2, Youngstown, Ohio. Youngstown is America's poster child for how did this house only cost $7. Once a titan of the steel industry, Youngstown has been in freefall since the 1970s, when the mills shut down and 50,000 jobs vanished almost overnight. Median home value today, $45,000. But here's where it gets insane. Local auctions have sold houses for under $5,000. That's not just cheap, that's grandma's old Buick costs more. Cheap. Rent, around $700 per month, and the cost of living is 28% lower than the national average. So what's the catch? Youngstown has one of the highest vacancy rates in the country. Entire blocks are abandoned, boarded up and falling into ruin. Population collapse, from 70,000 in 1930 to just 60,000 today. Poverty rate, crime, rough, with violent crime around 1,400, and yet, like a phoenix buried under rust, Youngstown refuses to die. Youngstown State University injects youth into the city and developers whisper about revitalization projects tied to tech and green energy. Locals even brag about their food peerages, Italian delis and family diners that haven't changed since 1956. A Redditor once summed it up: Youngstown is where you can buy a house with pocket change, but you'll need nerves of steel to live here. Imagine paying $350 a month on a mortgage for a full-size home while your friend in New York pays the same for a studio closet. Youngstown is a bargain, sure, but is it a bargain you'd actually want to cash in? Number 1. Buffalo, New York. Yes, Buffalo, the city best known for wings, blizzards, and an NFL team that loves to break its fans' hearts, also happens to be one of the cheapest major cities for real estate in America. Median home price, but here's the shocker: you can still find houses in certain neighborhoods for under $20. That's right, a house for less than a year at private school. Rent averages around $950 per month, which is almost half the national median. And here's the kicker: Buffalo isn't a dying town. Unlike Cairo or Youngstown, Buffalo is growing, the medical sector is booming, tech startups are moving in, and yes, there's a Tesla solar plant. Cost of living is 20% below the national average, and the poverty rate, while high at 26%, is slowly declining as jobs return. The downside: winters that feel like punishment from the gods. We're talking 90 inches of snow annually, snowdrifts that can bury cars, and one chill so brutal it feels like it's slicing through your soul. But the payoff is huge. Lake Erie sunsets, revitalized downtown, breweries on every corner, and homes cheap enough that even Californians are starting to notice. A Redditor wrote, Buffalo is where you buy a $30,000 house and then spend $3,000 a year on snow shovels and beer. Fair. Would you survive a Buffalo winter if it meant finally owning your own home, or would you run back to overpriced Sunshine States? Cheap housing never looked this frozen.